Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I grew up camping in the woods of Montana, so I wasn't the type to scare easily. My dad took me on my first trip when I was 8, and by the time I was old enough to buy my own tent, I'd spent more nights under the stars than in my own bed. The woods were home. That's why what happened 3 summers ago still doesn't sit right with me. There were 4 of us, me, James, Todd, and Kevin. We'd done this trip a dozen times before. Drive out to the middle of nowhere, hike until our legs burned, drink until we felt like philosophers, then crash in our tents and let the wilderness lull us to sleep. The first night was perfect. A crackling fire, cold beer, jokes that got funnier the later it got. By midnight, the flames had died to embers, and we turned in for the night. I remember zipping my sleeping bag up tight, rolling onto my side, and thinking, this is the best kind of peace. Then I woke up. I didn't know why at first, just that something had yanked me out of sleep so hard that my heart was hammering like I'd been running. I blinked in the dark, listening. Then I heard it, a whistle, low, long, almost like a song. I froze. Not a bird, not the wind. It sounded human, but something about it was off. Too slow, too precise. It came from the trees, maybe 50 feet away. I held my breath, listening, trying to tell myself it was just the wind pushing through the pines. But then, it moved. The whistle came again, this time from the opposite side of the camp. My stomach clenched. It wasn't the wind. James must have heard it too, because I saw the glow of his flashlight flick on through his tent. "You hear that?" he whispered. I swallowed hard. Yeah. Silence. Then footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. Not an animal. Not a raccoon scurrying through the brush. Someone was walking through our camp. My pulse pounded in my ears. I turned my head toward the sound, barely breathing. The steps came closer. They stopped right outside my tent. Then a long, sharp inhale. Not normal breathing. Not like someone standing in the cold, puffing out mist. This was wet and slow, sucking through the fabric like whatever was out there was smelling me. Every nerve in my body screamed, "Don't move." Then I heard James whisper, his voice trembling. "Who the hell is that?" The breathing stopped. Everything stopped. No wind. No crickets. No rustling leaves. Just dead air. Then something scratched against my tent. I snapped. My body moved before my brain caught up. My hand shot under my pillow, grabbed the hunting knife I always kept close, and slashed through the tent wall. A scream tore through the night. Not from me, not from James, but from whatever was outside. It wasn't human. Not fully. The sound was high and shrill, like a coyote caught in a trap, but wrong. James scrambled out of his tent, machete in hand. What the fuck? We shined our flashlights into the trees, expecting to see a bear, a mountain lion, a person, something. But there was nothing. No movement. No sound of something running. Like whatever had been there just vanished. Todd and Kevin stumbled out of their tents, groggy and pissed off. "What's going on?" Kevin muttered, rubbing his eyes. "There was something here," James said. His hands were shaking. I heard it breathing. Todd groaned. "Jesus, man, probably just a deer, but I knew it wasn't. James knew it too. The next morning, when the sun burned away the shadows, we found the footprints. Barefoot, human, but the toes were too long, almost like claws. James and I didn't argue when Todd and Kevin suggested packing up early. We hiked back in silence, the trees feeling too close, the air too still. We never went back. Sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I swear I hear it again. That same long, slow whistle. Closer. Waiting. Story 2. I used to love camping. There was something about being away from everything. No phones, no street lights, no traffic. Just you, the trees, and the sound of the wind moving through the leaves like an old ghost whispering secrets. It was my girlfriend's first time camping, and I promised her it'd be fun. A mistake. We drove deep into the Smoky Mountains, far enough that we hadn't seen another car in hours. The dirt road leading to our campsite was barely a road at all, more like a suggestion. The forest pressed in on both sides, thick and endless. By the time we found a clearing big enough for the tent, the sun was already sinking, bleeding red through the trees. "You sure about this?" she asked, hugging herself against the cold that came creeping in with the dusk. "Of course," I said, forcing a grin. "It's peaceful out here." We built a fire, cooked some cheap hot dogs, talked and laughed, and for a while, everything felt normal. That night, we zipped ourselves into the tent and lay there listening to the sounds of the forest, the chirping of insects, the occasional hoot of an owl, the rustling of something in the underbrush, probably just a deer. The first night was fine. The second, I wish we'd never stayed. Sometime past midnight, I woke up feeling strange. Not scared exactly, just off. The air inside the tent felt heavy, like the pressure had changed. My ears rang faintly, the way they do when you're in a plane right before takeoff. I turned my head to check on my girlfriend, expecting to see her curled up in her sleeping bag, sound asleep. But she was already awake. Her eyes were wide, locked onto the tent ceiling, unblinking. I could see the rise and fall of her chest. Too fast. She was breathing in these quick, shallow gasps, like she was trying not to make a sound. A cold knot twisted in my gut. "What's wrong?" I whispered. She didn't react, didn't even look at me, just kept staring straight up. Then, in a voice so low I almost didn't hear it, she whispered. Something crawled in. My whole body stiffened. "What?" She didn't answer. She just pointed at my feet. I followed her gaze down, and my breath caught in my throat. There was a lump at the bottom of the sleeping bag. A shape, small but not that small. Something was inside with us. My heart pounded against my ribs, hard enough that I swore I could hear it. The lump didn't move at first, and for a terrible, hopeful second, I thought maybe it was just the way the fabric had bunched up. Maybe I was imagining things. Then it shifted. I felt it, a slight pressure, like the weight of a hand resting against my ankle. No, not a hand, a breath. A shudder ran up my spine, cold as ice water. It was breathing. I lost it. I jerked my legs up and kicked hard. The thing moved. Fast. The lump skittered toward the edge of the tent, and suddenly the whole fabric bulged, as if something inside was scrambling to get out. The zipper screeched as the door tore open. I barely had time to grab my flashlight before it was gone. I fumbled with the light, my hand shaking so badly I almost dropped it. But when I finally got the beam steady, I saw something slipping into the trees. Not an animal, not a person. It was thin, too thin, long limbs that bent in the wrong places. Pale, like something that had never seen sunlight. And its face. No, there wasn't a face. Just smooth, empty skin where its features should have been. And then, just like that, it was gone. The wood swallowed it whole. For a long time, we sat there, too afraid to speak, too afraid to breathe. Then my girlfriend whispered, "We have to go. Now." We didn't pack, didn't check for footprints, just threw ourselves into the car and tore down that dirt road like something was chasing us. Neither of us said a word the entire way home. She refuses to go camping ever again. I don't blame her, because sometimes in the middle of the night, I wake up gasping, feeling the weight of something at my feet. And I know, whatever it was, it never really left. Story 3. 3 years ago, I did something stupid. I went camping alone. I know. You hear that and think, why the hell would you do that? You've seen enough horror movies to know it's a bad idea. But at the time, I wasn't thinking about ghosts or monsters. I just wanted to clear my head. Work had been a mess. My relationship had crumbled into something sour and ugly. I needed to be alone, away from people, away from noise, away from the constant buzzing of my phone. So I drove deep into the Oregon wilderness, found a secluded spot miles from anything resembling civilization, and pitched my tent. It was beautiful, quiet, peaceful, until the fog rolled in. I should have left right then. It came fast, swallowing the trees in thick, white tendrils. 1 second, I could see the stars above me. The next, it was like I'd been dropped into a dream. Hazy, muffled wrong. My fire barely flickered through the dense mist. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every branch looked like a figure standing still, just watching. And then I heard the singing, soft, gentle, a woman's voice floating through the fog. At first, I thought it was the wind. The way it whistled through the trees sometimes sounded almost human. But no, this was different. There was a melody, a pattern, a song. Only something about it was off. It didn't follow any tune I recognized. The notes twisted in ways that didn't make sense, like music played backward. I sat frozen. It was far away at first, but as the seconds stretched into minutes, the singing grew closer. I told myself it was another camper, someone lost in the fog, maybe humming to keep themselves calm. But deep down, I knew better. I was alone out there. I'd driven for hours into the woods. I hadn't passed a single soul, and still she sang. The sound drifted between the trees, echoing in ways that didn't seem natural. It came from the left, then the right, then somewhere behind me. I clenched my hands into fists, my nails digging into my palms. My instincts screamed at me to get up, to run, but my body wouldn't listen. Then, through the fog, I saw her. A woman, dressed in white, her gown tattered and clinging to her thin frame. Her hair hung in limp, dark strands over her face. She wasn't walking. She was gliding her bare feet hovering just above the ground. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then she stopped. For a long moment, she didn't do anything, just stood there, unmoving, as the fog swirled around her. I could feel my pulse hammering against my ribs, and then her head snapped toward me. Not turned, snapped, and I saw her face. Or, rather, I didn't. Her eyes were just black voids. Empty, hollow. Her mouth was too wide, stretched into something that barely resembled a smile. Her skin was pale, wet-looking, like something that had been left in the river too long. And then she ran, straight at me. No sound, no breathing, just movement. I don't remember grabbing my keys. I don't remember packing. I must have done something to get out of there. But the next thing I knew, I was in my car, speeding down that dirt road, the fog thickening in my rearview mirror. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely keep the wheel straight. When I got home, I barely slept. The woman's face, or lack of one, was burned into my mind. I had to know what I saw. I searched online for anything about the forest. I found stories, legends, about a woman who had drowned her children in the river decades ago. A mother driven mad by grief. Some said she had been betrayed by a man, left alone in the woods with no way out. Others claimed she was just evil. All the stories agreed on one thing. On foggy nights, she sings, and if you hear her, you don't run, because once you do, she never stops following. And that's the worst part. I still dream about her. In the dreams, I'm back in the fog. I hear the singing closer now, louder. Every time I wake up before she reaches me. But last night, I didn't. Last night, in the dream, she made it all the way to my tent. And when I woke up, my bedroom window was open.